In the winter of 2017, I worked as a night security guard at an abandoned psychiatric hospital in West Virginia. The facility had shut down years ago, but for legal reasons, the property still needed to be monitored. My job was simple: walk the halls, check for trespassers, and make sure nothing was out of place. At first it was easy. The silence was unsettling, but after a few nights I got used to the peeling wallpaper, the rusted bed frames, and the empty patient rooms filled with dust. The only thing I couldn't shake was the smell. It was faint, but always there, a mixture of damp, mildew, and something rotting. One night, during my usual rounds, I was checking the east wing when I noticed something strange. One of the patient room doors was open. Room 34. I distinctly remembered it being closed before. I stepped closer, shining my flashlight inside. The bed was still there, restraints dangling from the sides. The walls were covered in old scribbled notes, names of patients long forgotten. And then I saw the footprints, fresh, smeared along the dust-covered floor. Bare feet, leading from the bed to the corner of the room. I felt my chest tighten. There was nothing there, just shadows stretching up the peeling walls. But something about that dark corner felt wrong. Like if I looked too long, I'd see something I wasn't supposed to. I stepped back and shut the door, locking it. Maybe I had missed the prints earlier. Maybe it was my mind playing tricks on me. That's what I told myself. Until the next night. I walked past room 34 again, and this time, the door was wide open. The bed was empty. The footprints were fresh, and this time, they led into the hallway. I followed them, heart hammering in my chest. They twisted down the corridor, stopping at a rusted metal door at the end of the hall. This door had been locked for years. No one had the key. But now, it was slightly ajar. A whisper of cold air crept through the opening, carrying the scent of something foul. I reached out, hesitating, before pushing the door open completely. The room inside was wrong. It wasn't part of the hospital's floor plan. The walls weren't peeling like the rest of the building. The air felt thick. And in the center of the room, strapped to an old chair, was a man. His head was tilted forward, his body still, but I knew he was breathing. His chest rose and fell in slow, ragged movements. His wrists were bound, his skin stretched too tight over brittle bones. I stepped closer, flashlight shaking in my hand. That's when I saw his feet. They were bare, and the footprints were his. I stumbled back, panic clawing at my throat. But then, he lifted his head. His eyes were open, wide, bloodshot, filled with something unnatural. And then, in a voice that sent ice down my spine, he spoke. "You brought me back." I ran. I didn't stop until I was out of the building, gasping in the freezing night air. I called my supervisor, told them I was quitting. I never went back, but sometimes, in the dead of night, when I'm half asleep, I hear it again. That same voice. You brought me back. In the summer of 2019, I worked as a contractor for a restoration company. Our job was to assess and renovate old buildings, but sometimes we got projects that were beyond saving. That's how I ended up inside Black Ridge Asylum, a psychiatric hospital in rural Pennsylvania that had been abandoned for nearly 3 decades. The building had been shut down under strange circumstances. Patients were relocated overnight, records vanished, and no one talked about why. But our job wasn't to ask questions. We were just there to determine if the structure could be salvaged. From the moment I stepped inside, something felt off. The air was thick, stale with decay. Paint peeled from the walls in long, curling strips. and the hallways seemed too quiet, even for an empty building. The first few hours went smoothly, mostly taking notes on the collapsing ceilings and water damage. Then I found the door. It was at the end of a long corridor, different from the others. No window, no markings, just a thick metal slab. My crew had already mapped out the layout, and this door wasn't on the blueprints. I pushed on it, expecting it to be locked. Instead, it creaked open. A set of stairs led downward. I called out to my coworker, but my voice didn't echo. The space swallowed sound in a way that made my skin crawl. I turned on my flashlight and stepped down, one slow step at a time. At the bottom, I found a ward that shouldn't exist. Rows of rusted hospital beds lined the walls, each one restrained with thick leather straps. The air was damp, filled with the scent of mildew and something else, something rotten. Then I noticed the names. Each bed had a metal tag attached to the footboard, etched with names and dates. But the dates didn't make sense. Some went back to the 1800s, decades before the asylum was even built. Others were as recent as last year. A shiver ran down my spine. This place had been sealed for over 30 years. How could there be a recent date? Then, something shifted in the corner of my eye. I turned, my flashlight shaking. One of the beds was occupied. At first I thought it was just a pile of old sheets, twisted and decayed. But then I saw it. A figure, thin, gaunt, wrapped in rotting hospital linens, and breathing. A low rasp filled the air, barely audible over my own pounding heartbeat. The thing in the bed twitched, its head jerking unnaturally. My breath caught in my throat. I took a step back, and its eyes snapped open. Not human. Too dark. Too deep. Its mouth twitched, then stretched too wide, as if remembering how to smile. A whisper slithered from its throat. "You finally found us." I bolted up the stairs, my footsteps echoing in the suffocating silence. The second I reached the top, I slammed the door shut, locking it with a rusted chain that had been hanging nearby. When I found my coworker, I was gasping for air, shaking so hard I could barely speak. But when I tried to show him the door, it was gone. Just a blank wall. Like it had never existed. We left the site that day. The building was condemned a few months later, demolished without further inspections. I don't know what was down in that forgotten ward, how long they had been there, or what would have happened if I had stayed just a moment longer. But sometimes, in the middle of the night, I wake up gasping for air. Because in my dreams, I hear them still. You finally found us. In the spring of 2016, I took a job as a maintenance worker at an old psychiatric hospital in upstate New York. Unlike most abandoned asylums, this one was still partially operational, though most of the building had been shut down for years. Only a few wings were still in use, housing long-term patients, while the rest had been left to decay. My job was simple: fix leaks, patch up walls, and stay out of the way. On my second week there, I was assigned to repair a ceiling leak in an old, unused section of the building. The nurses called it Ward X, though there were no official records of it. I was told it had been shut down in the 1970s, but no one would tell me why. The moment I stepped into that hallway, the air felt heavier, almost charged. The walls were lined with old metal doors, each one sealed shut with thick iron locks. No patient names, no numbers, just locks that looked far too new for a place abandoned decades ago. As I worked, I kept getting the feeling that I wasn't alone. I'd catch glimpses of movement in my peripheral vision. But when I turned, the hallway was empty. The silence was worse than any noise. Not just quiet, too quiet. Like the air itself had stopped moving. That's when I saw it. One of the doors, the last one on the left, was slightly open, just enough to see a sliver of darkness inside. I knew I shouldn't, but something compelled me forward. The metal door groaned as I pushed it open. The room beyond was wrong. It didn't look abandoned like the rest of the hospital. The bed was clean, the walls weren't peeling, there were no signs of dust or decay. It was like someone had been living there. Then I saw the chair, bolted to the center of the room. Leather restraints still buckled. The floor beneath it was stained, dark, nearly black. Not just old blood. Something deeper, something soaked into the foundation. On the far wall, there were drawings. Not childish scribbles, but complex diagrams. Notes in a language I couldn't understand. And then, my eyes landed on something that made my stomach lurch. A mirror. But it wasn't reflecting the room I was standing in. The mirror showed another version of the room. Same chair, same walls, but the room in the reflection was not empty. There was a man strapped to the chair, his head tilted to the side, eyes wide open but unseeing. His lips were moving, but no sound came out. I stumbled backward, slamming against the wall, my breath coming in shallow gasps. Then the lights flickered. For a split second, the reflection and the real room aligned, and the chair in front of me was no longer empty. I ran. I didn't care about my tools, my job, nothing. I bolted out of that wing out into the main hallway, gasping for air. When I told my supervisor what I had seen, his face went pale. "You weren't supposed to go in there," he said. "That ward was for experiments." He wouldn't say anything else, but I found old reports later. Documents buried in archived folders, patients who were never discharged, procedures that were never recorded, and one name that stood out: Dr. William Eckhart, the man in the chair. The reports say he went missing in 1974, locked himself in one of the experiment rooms, and was never seen again. No body, no explanation, just gone. But I know where he is. He's still there, still strapped to that chair, waiting. Some places should stay forgotten. Some patients were never meant to leave, and some are still waiting. If these stories sent chills down your spine, hit like, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe for more terrifying true horror stories. And don't forget to hit the bell icon, because some places never let go.